Hello. Welcome to the District of Sechelt Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, June the 12th. It is now 3 o'clock. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. The District of Sechelt is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation. We respect the histories, language, and culture of the people of the Sechelt Nation, whose presence continues to enrich this community. So today we have one delegation and two business items. And so I will turn it over to, sorry, my apologies. Call to order and see if there's any declaration of conflict. Seeing none, call for a vote on adopting the agenda. All in favor? Everyone's in favor. Now I will go to the delegation. So please to Dawn Allen. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the council for hearing from us today, and to staff, especially Carrie Ann, for facilitating the administrative side of our presentation. I'm Dawn Allen, the lead organizer for Soo Big Oil for the Sunshine Coast. And with me this afternoon are many residents who have been involved in this campaign. Together, we represent a local team of over 40 volunteers who are part of a province-wide campaign that's organized by West Coast Environmental Law. Andrew Gage, who is on the Zoom feed, is a lawyer with the project lead for West Coast Environmental Law's climate change program, and is here to help answer any questions that might arise. Our goal for this presentation is to urge the District of Sechelt to collaborate with other local governments across BC in an effort to get the largest oil companies to pay their fair share of our climate change costs. We know that our communities have been and will increasingly be paying for a wide range of climate-related impacts. Summer's heat and drought conditions and the increasingly dangerous fire season are upon us. Last year was officially the most destructive and most costly wildfire season ever recorded. The Okanagan and Shuswap fires alone caused over $720 million in insured damage. The costs of BC's 2021 heat dome are an estimated $17 billion in economic losses on top of the more tragic loss of life. As you know, over 600 people and roughly 1 billion sea creatures. Each summer here, distressed trees and shrubs and degraded sport fields and parks are daily reminders of increasingly frequent and severe heat and water restrictions. And the costs of finding and establishing new water sources have been described as astronomical. Sea level rise and flooding are also a more regular and increasing problem. The response to flooding in 2021 in the town of Merritt paid $149 million in repairs and anticipates another $165 million for prevention. Squamish is building a seawall estimated at over $11 million in response to storm surges. And closer to home, we know that sea level rise is seriously impacting our water supply and our water treatment systems. Gibson's estimates that it will be paying over $20 million to move sewage and water systems away from saltwater intrusion. And similarly, here in Sechelt, we're facing huge costs related to infrastructure degradation and relocation, as well as costs related to storm surges impacting Davis Bay waterfront, the flooding of businesses, parklands, and the homes of many concerned citizens. And of course, climate change costs will increase as the severity and frequency of extreme weather events also increase. As you know, in the past several years alone, there have been multiple extreme weather events that have triggered the activation of emergency operations on the Sunshine Coast for the SCRD. So it's easy to imagine that in the coming years, many local governments across BC will be paying tens of millions of dollars, both responding to and preparing for climate change damage. What's hard to imagine is how local governments and taxpayers will pay for these rising costs. We're talking about costs that are well beyond the limited revenue streams generated by local taxes. In fact, we're talking about costs that are well beyond what even the province can pay. But in any case, it shouldn't be taxpayers and governments paying the full cost of climate change. So who should and who can? It turns out that the industry most responsible for causing climate change also earns billions of dollars a day in profit. The fossil fuel industry has earned an estimated $3 billion daily for the past 50 years. And in 2022 alone, it earned $11 billion daily. That's $4 trillion in 1 year. So to help our communities pay for climate costs, the Sue Big Oil campaign is aiming to get oil companies to pay their fair share, not the full cost, just their fair share. And establishing what is their fair share is now possible thanks to the work of attribution scientists such as Richard Heed of the Climate Accountability Institute, which is a nonprofit which works in collaboration with the Union of Concerned Scientists and others. So while we're all responsible for climate change, we are not all equally responsible. The fossil fuel industry has done far more to cause climate change damage than any other industry or individual. As authors such as Jeff Dembicki and Jean Vaillant and others have shown, since the 1960s, scientific studies funded by the fossil fuel industry have been proving a direct link between the burning of fossil fuels and global warming. Yet these companies have lobbied against climate action. They have failed to develop alternative sources of energy for which they held patents, and they have invested billions of dollars in sowing doubt about climate change. We know now unequivocally what these companies have known for decades, that the climate crisis is the direct result of greenhouse gases and the burning of fossil fuels. And the world is taking notice. Worldwide, climate litigation has been increasing and expanding. In 2020, a large group of citizens and organizations in the Netherlands won a case against Shell Oil, forcing it to take responsibility for its CO2 emissions. According to the Saban Center of Climate Law, there are currently 37 cases against corporations for climate damage, including several against, non-US cases, including several against oil companies in France, Belgium, and the UK. In the United States, there are approximately 24 lawsuits representing 70 cities, counties, and states who are pursuing the oil industry for climate costs and damages. Some examples include the Multnomah County, Oregon case suing Big Oil for $50 million in damages from the 2021 heat dome, plus an additional $51.5 billion for future damages and an abatement fund. The state of California is also now suing 5 of the biggest oil companies, including Chevron, which is headquartered in California. We're also seeing governments being sued for not doing enough to protect their citizens from climate change. In April this year, the top European court ruled that the Swiss government had violated its citizens' rights because it had failed to do enough to combat climate change. And last summer, Montana youth won a case against their government for violating their right to a clean and healthy environment because it didn't do enough to mitigate the impact of the fossil fuel industry on climate. So why climate litigation? First, courts are where we resolve injustices. Lawyers acting for the greater good have won precedent-setting lawsuits. Women's rights, civil rights, labor rights, gay rights, and increasingly corporate accountability. Big Oil represents in part an issue of economic injustice with massive social and environmental implications. Second, tobacco companies were successfully held to account, so similar lawsuits have been successful. And the tobacco case, they were held to account for lying about the harm their products cause. And many legal experts, including 28 Canadian law profs, see many similarities between Big Oil and Big Tobacco. And as I just mentioned earlier, in 2020, an environmental group in the Netherlands won a lawsuit against Shell Oil for its role in the climate crisis. Third, this is a minimal truly minimal investment for huge climate costs. Class action lawsuits are a much more affordable way of taking legal action because legal costs are shared and legal risks are reduced. BC law also protects local governments from having to pay the opposing side's fees in the case of a loss. Little or no staff time will be needed for this campaign unless the District of Sechelt chooses to be one of the lead plaintiffs in the case. And finally, this is a local opportunity for globally impactful climate leadership. In 2022, our community made international news because of severe water shortage caused by drought. This class action suit gives us an opportunity to make the news for climate leadership. It's a way for us to help shift the fossil fuel corporations toward renewables and to hold them to account for their share of the climate costs we currently bear. To share the costs of launching this class action proportionally across municipalities, West Coast Environmental Law recommends a contribution of $1 per resident. For the District of Sechelt, I believe that amount would be approximately $12,000. This is a tiny portion of what we currently pay in response to climate change. The campaign asks that the money be set aside, but no money will be spent until there is a critical mass of BC municipalities on board, that is, representing at least 500,000 residents. None of this money goes towards West Coast Environmental Law or its partner organizations. West Coast Environmental Law is a nonprofit that is simply advocating for this lawsuit. Citizens in all of these municipalities and regions are engaged in this initiative. So far, the local governments of Gibsons, Squamish, View Royal, Qualicum Beach, Slocan, and most recently Burnaby and Port Moody have all voted to support this campaign. And the staff of the District of Saanich have brought a similar proposal to their council. Support for this initiative is high in Sechelt and on the coast. More than 740 Sechelt residents have signed the petition, and over 2,100 Sunshine Coast residents have signed. In our door-to-door canvassing, 70% canvassing in Sechelt, 70% of the people with whom we speak support the initiative and sign the petition. This figure resonates with the Stratcom poll showing 69% of BC residents support getting big oil to pay their fair share. To conclude, we have a very practical, fiscally responsible opportunity to recoup costs for some of the astronomical climate damage expenses we are facing. Given the very high levels of support from our community, participation in this class action seems like not just an opportunity, but a responsibility. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Allen, for the presentation. I am really interested to see what the opinions are amongst council of this. I think you're aware that no decisions made today on what to do. This is council of the whole, so it's really to try and air everyone's opinion on it and perhaps make a recommendation or so. Anyway, I will open it up to councillors. Councillor Bell to start off. Thank you.
Through the chair, to our delegation. And how do you define big oil?
Andrew, I'm going to lob that one over to you.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks very much. I mean, there's always sort of a legal side to this and a campaign side. We've called it the Sue Big Oil campaign because that's very simple. Really the lawsuit would also could well also include coal companies or other fossil fuel producing companies. The work that Don mentioned by Richard Heedy, a scientist in the States, has identified 90 entities that are primarily fossil fuel companies. They're responsible for almost 2/3 of global emissions. So I think in principle, any of those are ones that we would talk about as big oil. The ultimate list of who gets sued will depend on the lead plaintiff and their legal team, the team that they hire of lawyers. And we would anticipate that they would pick a relatively small group of maybe the 5 or 6 largest of the companies in terms of their contribution to the climate change problem. So those would be companies like Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, possibly Saudi Aramco, and some of those types of companies. But in principle, the point we're trying to make is it catches a much larger group of companies. We're able to sue these global entities for their global contribution to the problem because they are causing harm here in British Columbia. So we're not limited. This is not targeting Canadian companies or anything like that. It is going after the largest of the companies in terms of their contribution to the problem.
Thank you. One more? There was a slide where you mentioned 500,000 residents. I'm not sure. Can you go back to that? And I'd just like to know a little bit more how you came up with that number.
500,000 residents represents the number of people in BC represented by the local governments who agree to participate in the class action initiative.
So if I can jump in a bit, the ask is that each municipality contribute $1 per resident towards the costs of the class action. The first stage in the class action, and one of the most critical stages, is for a judge to take a first look and certify that this case should be heard as a class action. And as part of that, the judge will rule about whether the case has merit. Based on class action lawyers we've spoken to, the cost of getting to that stage is somewhere in the $500,000 range. So that's where that figure comes from. Once we have that ruling, if you have a judge saying, this case has merit, they're going to address the issues like, can local governments bring this type of case? What causes of action are recognized as being applicable here? And these sort of key questions that will be at least addressed in principle by the court. And a ruling on that, we think, will make any further, first of all, if the judge says, no, this case doesn't have merit or can't proceed as a class action, we're back to square one, but we learned that very early where the investment's only $1 per resident. And if the judge rules, as we expect them to do so, that the case can proceed, you have the benefit of a ruling saying, here's how the local governments will have to, what the local governments will have to prove to be successful. That'll provide a much more solid basis for any further fundraising or taking the case forward, whether it be from private funders or from crowdfunding or other sources, or from further contributions by the involved local governments. But that's the thinking behind the 500,000, is it gets us to that key stage so that we can have some confidence that the case should proceed at that point.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm looking elsewhere for comments on the presentation. Mayor Henderson.
Chair, thank you. I guess I've got a bunch of thoughts, but I think the key one to council is this is about going after big oil, but would it not be better to go after the users of oil? We often, you would normally go after the party that benefits. And I'm going to suggest that, in fact, the benefits are much broader than profits in a company. Profits in a company, among other things, support things like pensions and create jobs and all of that stuff. But we all benefit from oil. So I'm struggling with how this would make a difference that we're ending up in a confrontation rather than a collaboration. And I think my encouragement to council is to assess, is this the best way to achieve a goal that we're all interested in, of course, in terms of mitigating the impacts of climate, on the climate, whether it's from oil or coal or anything else. So I don't find it appealing to support a litigation process as much as figuring out how do we actually come up with viable options in a collaborative approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I have a number of thoughts on this subject, but just in reference to the last question, I really don't think it's workable to go after soccer moms. I think it's more workable. Okay, sorry. It's because I was talking through the chair, but I will repeat it again. I don't think it's workable to go after soccer moms. I think it's more important that we go after the companies, the faceless companies that are making the profit, that this will require them to contribute a small piece of their profit and or a small piece of their dividend to deal with such an important challenge for our planet. So I think the more workable solution is to pursue 6 to 10 companies that are making a lot of profit than thousands and thousands and millions of pensioners and soccer moms and people struggling to pay the gas tax and the cost of gasoline. Not everyone yet drives electric, but there's a number of people that right now still pay for gasoline on a weekly basis. And that payment for that gasoline has led to not only large government collections of taxation, I guess we could call it a sin tax, but also large amounts of millions and billions of dollars over the last 50 to 100 years in profit for the companies. I mean, we know that Standard Oil was so big that it had to be broken up by the antitrust people in the United States. And the people connected to those companies were very wealthy, and many of them were called robber barons. And that was actually quite a popular term for a reason. Those are just my thoughts on those subjects to start. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Inkster. I'm looking elsewhere. Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I expressed early concerns about making such large political statements without having a better understanding about how the community feels. So I do appreciate that the work that the Sunshine Coast volunteers have done in canvassing and getting that support, like 70%, that shows widespread support for an initiative. In terms of the dollars, $12,000 is a very inexpensive contribution if it helps the District of Sechelt come up with funding to pay for the millions of dollars worth of mitigation and adaptation work that's going to be required in the coming years due to climate change. You read online all the, pro-electric, anti-electric, pro-big oil, anti-big oil conversations. There's so much misinformation that is out there that does get spread by people. In terms of, folks driving electric vehicles, I've got an electric vehicle, Mayor has a couple of electric vehicles. We know that they're good for our society in terms of emissions, maintenance, operating costs. But this is really about so much more, like everything, pretty much everything on this table depended on oil to be produced. And it's just making sure that we're capturing the damage that the production of everything is causing. There's one really good book out there that I'd like to recommend councilors read. It's called Internal Combustion, and it's by Edwin Black. And it talks a lot about Standard Oil, the antitrust, the early days of oil and transportation. And it's quite a fascinating read. So I am generally supportive of this endeavor. I just wanted to know that there was broader community support for it. And I hear that today. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you very much for your presentation today. I am and have been all along in support of Soo Big Oil. And I just wanted to point out the culpability of the oil companies. Again, it's similar to the tobacco companies who had a lot of research, as those two books you showed clearly state. And there was so much denial and misinformation that it was, it was very difficult for the public to really get a handle on things. And now we see the consequences. And we have to pay for, not so much us, most people in this room are getting older, but for our kids and our grandkids for the future. So this is why this is a very small contribution to start to say that it's a gesture really towards that, which hopefully will be a slight inspiration to get this whole community motivated and staff and this council to frame things in terms of climate change and moving forward in a positive way. Thank you.
Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Rowe.
Councillor Rowe.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. And to echo Councillor Toth, yes, thank you so much for the work that you've done. He and I did meet with a representative like a couple years ago on this topic, and that was what our, sort of advice and or ask was. So really appreciate the door knocking that you guys have done. And, I too think about this as it relates to the tobacco industry. And when I think of, for those that you don't know, I'm a nurse, so have spent a lot of time reading old tobacco ads with the doctors handing the cigarettes out while they're in their office, right? And so, not only that, but endorsing them. So I see this through the light of transparency as well, because I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the argument is the transparency around the amount of damage that, fossil fuel can do. It's not just about, yes, I still drive a gas car. I'm down to 3 cylinders, but I'm not quite electric yet. There is recognition there, and I think we can do both, to Mayor Henderson's point around collaborating and moving towards that. And maybe this is an incentive as well for fossil fuel companies to move a bit faster towards greener solutions. Anyways, generally speaking, I am in support of the work that you guys are doing. My question for you is, the critical mass is 500,000 people. And I think there's been some added communities up there since I've looked. So what kind of critical mass are you at without Sechelt? Don't count us in at this point.
Andrew, I think you know the specific numbers.
So the answer is a little bit complicated. So recently Burnaby voted to endorse the campaign. So that's a large number. Their population is about 250,000 people. With that, we have about 340,000 in total. That being said, Burnaby made it a condition of their support that another municipality with a population of 150,000 people also sign on. That hasn't occurred as yet. There's lots of moving pieces here, and I'm sorry not to give you a clear answer on that. But there's definitely momentum there, and we're reaching out to all of the municipalities that hit that threshold, as well as other municipalities across the province, and so But I should say, I mean, the 500,000 people is our recommendation as a campaign ask. We also do need a local government or local governments to step up and serve the role as a lead plaintiff, being the ones who are actually named on the case. And that's a larger commitment for that community or communities. So, there's nothing wrong with making this pledge conditional on that, and not some municipalities have put money actually into budgets. Other municipalities have just said, we will bring this back and vote on the money, the money being available, but we're making a commitment in principle once that lead plaintiff is identified, or once that, in case of Burnaby, another municipality of 150,000 people or more has come forward. It's a little bit in process, and there's always that chicken and egg aspect of like, we're pressing from the outside for this, but we can't control the sort of timing or the approach that the municipalities that might actually take this on follow. If I could, I know this isn't answering that question that was just made. I did want to comment briefly on the whole perception that because we're all culpable in the oil and gas economy, and I think that's true to a degree. But if we're all culpable, if we're all responsible for climate change, then the oil and gas industry is also responsible for climate change. And right now, they're really making massive profits without paying any of the costs. So taxpayers, ordinary, the soccer moms are paying for the cost of climate change one way or another. But they're not making massive profits. They haven't been involved in decades of deception to delay action on climate change. And as a matter of law, their emissions are not globally detectable, which is the threshold for when you can actually sue people for this, in our view. So I just want to emphasize that we're not saying that individuals won't end up paying. We're already paying those costs. we're saying that if you have an industry that's making massive profits, selling the products that cause climate change and is taking no responsibility for the harm caused, that's bad economics. It moves us in the wrong direction, well harming our communities. They need to pay something. It's not an us versus them. It's let's all be responsible. And we need this lawsuit to make sure that they are responsible. So sorry, I know that wasn't your question, Councillor Rowe, but I just wanted to respond to that from earlier.
Thank you.
Councillor Inkster.
My hand up, but thank you. I just have a question for you, Chair, is what the process moving forward is. I'm heard from a number of councillors, and I'm thankful that they've heard the well-argued comprehensive argument from Ms. Allen to move in a direction of this particular lawsuit with a number of other municipalities. We have made decisions at Committee of the Whole previously. I've seen it in the last year. I'm just asking you, Chair, if you're aware of that previous decision and if you'd still like us to proceed to the minutes coming to, I guess, council to make the decision. If in fact that's the route we'll move, I will hold a series of comments and arguments that I have for that meeting, but I would love to see us proceed today. Thank you.
Well, I'm generally hearing support for it. Sorry, Councillor Toth, go ahead. I'm generally hearing support for the idea of the contribution. My own personal opinion would be to ask staff for options. I mean, we're hearing about what tack different municipalities are taking. Some are looking for 400,000 people to be signed up before they actually contribute the money. So I personally would opt for that route, but and get a recommendations from council, or sorry, from staff to come back to council rather than doing something right now. But I really look to others. Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I disagree. I think that this is a political decision on our part. And I think, you know, when we talk about if we want to hold off until somebody else signs up, I think those are all decisions that are ours to make. When we talk about $12,000, well, first of all, we're talking about pledging $12,000. The bill's not due yet. I don't know if Andrew can speak to, you know, when it might become due at the rate they're going. But when it comes time for the district of Sechelt, if we support this, to pony up the $12,000, it can come from just about anywhere, including council contingency. So from that perspective, I'm actually willing to make a recommendation right now. We'll still have to vote on it again at council, of course. But my recommendation would be that the district of Sechelt sign on to the Soo Big Oil campaign and pledge $1 per resident to contribute to that campaign.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Inkster has seconder.
Yeah.
Anyone want to comment on that? Councillor Bell? Oh, Councillor Inkster.
You're okay?
Yep.
Okay, sometimes I've blocked Councillor
Yes,
Bell.
you
She's
do.
told me that.
It's very big.
Yeah, and he doesn't appreciate it. But I mean, your argument, Chair, Burnaby, that's a similar argument to Burnaby. I know what you're referencing, the 250, 150, but I mean, in our sense, let's say we will step up after a municipality close to our size steps up. Gibson's did. Check, right? So I think that's why I'm seconding this, and I do think that $1 is not enough. I know that Councillor Rowe has a number of toonies she carries around. It probably covered council's portion right now. But I think it's a small amount, and I think we need to step forward. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak to this? Mayor Henderson?
Thank you. Yes, that's our volunteer firefighters off to hopefully take care of people successfully. Can I ask, sorry, Mr. Gage, I'm looking directly at you at the moment, but Ms. Allen, what municipalities have either turned down your request or are still dithering, if that's the right word.
Okay, let me think. Machosen and Highlands have both turned it down, although I think they left open the door to considering it in the future, but they've made a decision not to support it at this time. It's not a question I'm usually asked. Oh, Powell River did vote not to like to basically take a wait and see approach and not support it at this time. I'm trying to think if there are others in terms of other ones that we know are still considering it. As Don mentioned, staff in the district of Saanich recommend to their council that they be asked to look into options to bring this type of case, but haven't reported back yet on it. The Capital Regional District has also directed staff to do a report, and there's been no official announcement about the outcome of that.
Thank you.
There was a delegation done just recently to Cumberland but that was, I mean, I wouldn't say the dithering, they've literally just received the delegation within the last week. We were hopeful that'll come back. We've generally had conversations with councils before matters go to a council, so there haven't been a ton of out of the blue requests.
Thank
So
you.
I don't think there's a large list of ones that haven't that have actually voted against it. There are others that we haven't yet made an formal approach to.
Have you approached anybody in the north? Like, I mean, when I say the north, I mean Merritt to Kelowna to Cornell to Prince George.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've had various events that we've invited councillors from all of those communities to, but there hasn't. We've generally moved forward where there's a local group that's able to sort of ground truth it in that community. And we haven't had as many people in those communities playing that role. There's an active group in Kelowna and Nelson and the Kootenays or whatever, but in terms of further north than that, no, there aren't. We haven't been very active there yet. I mean, which I do think is something we need to work on, because of course those communities have some of the largest impacts of climate change in terms of the wildfires and other impacts.
Thanks. If I could just add to that, did Vancouver not initially vote
yeah.
for it under the previous mayor and then backed out under the current mayor?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a fairly major omission. I should have mentioned that. Yes, Vancouver did vote in favor of it under the previous council. The current council, what the previous council did was to ask staff to put into the budget for 2023, I believe, the $1 per resident. And for whatever reason, we're not totally clear on what it was, that didn't actually occur. So a motion was brought to put some funds back into the budget, and that motion was voted down. It was sort of a roundabout way, and it can be interpreted that was certainly we did interpret that as that the current council is less supportive. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on the motion in front of council? I'll add my own piece. I'm actually in support of the idea. In fact, I signed the petition, but I'm opposed to this motion because I want staff to come up with more specifics. I find it very general. So I'll leave it at that. But I will call the vote. Everyone in support of Councillor Toth's motion. In favor? And opposed? So that motion carries. Thank you very much. That's a recommendation to go to council. So,
Thank you.
all right, thanks very much. And we will move on to business item 5.1, Seashell Legion 140, financial assistance options for frontage contribution costs. And I will, I think, turn this over to the Director of Engineering or Director of Finance.
Thank you very much. The, so throughout this, project, sorry, we'll wait then a second. Thank you. Throughout this project, the Legion knew that they were going to be required to contribute something to the project as, they're required for covering some of the frontage charges or the frontage charges. Or they would have had to carry out the work. And the cost, as we found out, came in at 128,440. One time we talked to them about, stretching their payments out 10 years, no interest. And they seemed to be okay with that at one point. Council asked us to go away and consider some kind of a grant in the amount of around $50,000. We have come back with that report. Can be done. They are a nonprofit. And that would leave about 78,000 remaining if we granted them any funds.
Okay, Council, we have a recommendation in front of us. Any comments on that? Councillor Bell, sorry.
Through the chair, I just will let the council know that I did make a call through with Brenda, Councillor Rowe there today to Director Douglas, because my question was around the $50,000 and just wanting to ensure that it's a nonprofit status so it just want to know that question came up and just to share that more than anything.
And sorry, what is the answer?
And if you'd like to maybe just make a comment on that, Director Douglas.
So her, Councillor Bell's question was around, could we do a grant and allow them 10 years to pay back which is in my recommendation. And I said that would be a recommendation that somebody could make at the table without problem.
Yeah. So I'll let discussion happen, but I do have a motion.
Oh, all right. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I'm, thanks to, through you to finance staff for both these reports coming up with some solutions where council, I think, is trying to support community groups and our community. I think it's our role and it's a good thing the right thing to do. I saw I was glad to see the piece that we asked them to annually pay us back. Wasn't sure what the original amount was, how they were paid, whether it was lump sum, because we did hear some concerns from this community group. Now, we all know about the Legion and what they do in our community, and I know that the mayor is there when they first opened, so obviously he supports what they do. The stuff that we all know, that the things that they do for the community groups, cadets, vets, in a lot of cases, older people, because of the cost of the meals in a lot of cases and some of the things they do and the money donated. So I'm really supportive of how we can help a community group that will probably turn what we help them with probably into 10 times the amount of community help. My thought was, and I know that Councillor Bell's motion, I didn't know about it, but that she would have a motion, but my thought was also to look at us contributing $6,000 a year to what they owed us over 10 years. That's a little more money over 10 years. So it's not the lump sum, but it's contributing to the amount they owe us. So it basically cuts it almost in half over 10 years. And the reason I suggested that is it's a way for us to figure out how to help them over a number of years. And it's a slightly larger amount as the years increase based on the fact that there's going to be inflation anyway. So that's just one of my ideas. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, just so I understand that, Councillor Inkster, you're suggesting a contribution of $6,000 by the district towards per year
Yeah.
for 10 years.
Yeah, because they were required, I believe, based on the report, to contribute a certain amount back to us over a 10-year period. So we continue with the payment plan. We just knock $6,000 off of that over 10 years per year.
So instead of 12,000, it's 6,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it means it takes into account inflation and it helps them every year and it gives them a more predictable cash flow and or payment to the district over a number of years. And in a sense, helps them moving forward with some of the other activities they do by not expecting as much money from them annually. Thanks.
Okay, so that's like an option 5 if
Yeah.
Councillor
lots of
Bell's
options.
idea is an option 4.
Yeah, I mean, staff did a really good job with putting some ideas together, and sure, option 5. Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to know a little more from Councillor Inkster on what the potential benefit to that would be versus giving them, $50,000 grant today and then the 10-year period. But I did have a question for staff through you, Chair. Have we done frontage contribution reimbursement loans agreements with other groups in the past? Like, is this a regular thing that we do? And one of the things I'm looking at here with this recommendation is that, the interest-free period, I assume, is something that we wouldn't normally do with groups that, if we do a spread out repayment. And so 128,000 over a 10-year term, even just at 5%, ends up being about $35,000 in interest that we're forgiving them, basically. So I just wonder if staff could speak to other payment arrangements that we use here.
Director Douglas.
Often this would not be, it would not be offered. Often when you're doing frontage, it's with a for-profit company, so you wouldn't offer that to a for-profit company. The only, being a nonprofit, we have a little bit of flexibility there with grants and other things. So no, I would say this isn't common. When they came forward, some time ago and talked about options, they put that option forward about paying over a 10-year period. Was that something we could live with? And, staff discussed it a bit and we thought it was something we could live with.
Councillor Inkster.
Thanks. I think that what we may need to keep in mind with the particular amount that this has costed them is I guess good for that area, did some improvements to the road and sidewalk, et cetera, and gutters. And it is true that other facilities such as this, and Churchill was an example, have done probably had some frontage tackles, but I doubt they were this high because of the nature of the works we put in place. I would be really surprised to hear that the Catholic Church in West Sechelt on Nickerson that we're all aware of paid a per square foot frontage tax or frontage fee equal to this, because that would mean they probably paid us, if everyone's been up there, $1.5 million at least, I would say, based on their frontage. And if that can be presented to me, that's helpful. But I think that the problem in this case is that particular organization chose a building because they couldn't most likely afford their existing one with all their contributions they make, et cetera. They chose a building that then had some downtown revite occur in the same area, and then they were requested to pay for that revite. Thanks.
Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I don't think one of the options that was discussed early on with the Legion was to have any amount of grant. I mean, they were told, I think they've been told that they're going to owe, without really any choice, $28,440. It wasn't really, I don't think they felt they had any choice. So if you offered them to pay that over 10 years, yeah, sure, that sounds better maybe, because it's really, I think, a very difficult thing to ask of them, especially going through such a transition of getting into a new place, getting it done a lot by volunteers and just struggling to pull it off. I don't know if included in that frontage fees is like sewers and things, improvements and expansions that really don't have anything to do with Legion, or just a coincidence perhaps that the Legion happened to be moving in there at that time, unfortunately for them. But, so this is why originally I thought it'd be reasonable to take $100,000 off that, because an extra 28,000, 30,000 for a small nonprofit is a lot as well, for something that is an unusual frontage fee on a project. And then, it was reduced with the council of just 50,000. So I think 50,000 taken off and not expecting them to pay it back or be alone is more reasonable, considering the circumstances. And I don't know if that was ever really something that was offered to them, and which is why we brought it up at council as an idea out of the blue when we saw this whole report come forward with the numbers. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Dort.
All right, sorry, I just want to add some context. So we did look at past cases of frontage improvements for nonprofits. The most recent one was Bethany Baptist Church on Mermaid. Paid about $65,000 at the time of those improvements. If you bring those costs forward with inflation, works out to about $90,000 in today's money. So, and another point I want to clarify is that the frontage improvements in front of Legion would have had to be done regardless under our current bylaws. What sets that threshold is the $50,000 in improvements, and that's definitely something staff are looking at. We think that number's too low and should be made higher to reflect current realities. The underground works, the water, sewer, that stuff would not have been attributed to Legion. It would have been what they would have had to be construct if they had gone alone, which would have simply been the sidewalks in front, the trees, and the tie-in into the existing roads. So, and I think a big cost of that was the archaeological, which is an issue that's emerged and is going to be faced by every business from now on who's doing frontage improvements in the downtown core. And even, you know, before this was an issue, notably Bethany Baptist Church at $90,000 in today's money is in a similar range. So I would say that we managed that aspect, the archaeology, the best we could, and probably reduced their timeline for getting a permit because we had proactively gone out and got it well in advance. So just wanted to clarify a few things.
Actually, thanks very much. That helps with background that we, even though it's a nonprofit, we're trying to be fair. So, I mean, for my own opinion, I'm sort of weighing in and accepting the recommendation because they've accepted it and it's sort of reasonable. But anyway, I'll keep looking for opinions. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I just wondered if we could know the frontage length of Bethany Church versus the Legion, because it's based on the length of the frontage. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. So I don't have that in front of me right this instant, but looking at it, it's a similar length. I don't know the exact numbers, but it is a similar. And I think in the case of Bethany, it was actually a corner lot. So you're looking at frontage along Mermaid, but also along trails. So, you know, perhaps it would be in the similar order.
Sorry, Mayor Henderson.
Thank you. Two things, I guess, to clarify. Are we comfortable that we can extend a 10-year payment program? I know without sort of, heaven forbid, an AAP. Like I know on the borrowing side, we couldn't go out and borrow for more than 5 years without a whole procedure. So this is a procedural question. Are we okay to go 10 years? And the second part is, has anybody amongst us talked to the Legion about what works for them? Well,
Please,
I mean, not several months ago, in the last month, because I'm aware that there were discussions 3 months ago or so. So it's not a trick question. It's just, have they indicated that they have any preferences?
Nobody, I don't think anybody's talked to them in the last month, but once we got to know the number, we talked to them about that. So, you know, that's it would have been pretty current information at the time.
About 3
As
months
per,
ago, yeah.
or would we be allowed to do this in community charter? Community charter talks more about liability, not greater than 5 years. So this isn't creating a liability, so I think we're fine with that being a 10-year.
Right, okay, thank you. Yep.
Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to the frontage that we've been discussing, I would say because both buildings are very close and many of us drive and walk by, that the frontage on the Bethel, the Baptist Church, which I believe is on Trail, that's the one. I would say the frontage is 4 times as much. I would say the piece on Trail is as high as wide as the Legion frontage, because that's what I think we're measuring. And then the other piece that goes along Mermaid is probably be 3 times as much. So that's 4 times as much frontage.
I-
I'm just wondering.
Or instead of haggling over the frontage here, it's the amount itself. And you know what, I'm actually going to move to Councillor Bell, who has a motion, I think.
Yes, I would like to move that we offer the Sechelt Legion 140 the grant of $50,000 and have them reimburse the District of Sechelt in the total amount of $78,440 over a 10-year interest-free period.
$40,000 grant.
$50,000 grant, and then have them reimburse the District of Sechelt in the total amount of $78,440 over a 10-year period. So essentially, the money, the total was 120, what was it, 128? 128,440 minus 50,000, so that's the balance, 78,440.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Rowe has seconded. Does anyone have comments on that recommendation or that solution motion? Councillor Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in conjunction with, $35,000 worth of interest being waived, it ends up being an $85,000 contribution to the Legion. So, it's not quite 100,000, but it does end up being a fairly significant contribution if that's the way we want to proceed. I'm a little torn. I actually really liked the staff recommendation, interest-free period, spreading it out. But we'll see how it goes. Thanks.
Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to support this because we're going in my mind in the right direction. But I'd love to have seen the 6 over a number of years, but just a little more. But it's in front of us, and I'll support it to help them out.
Anyone else have a comment before I call a vote? Okay, I'm going to call a vote on that motion. All in favor? Councillor Shepherd opposed. Moving on to the final business item, 5.2, Sunshine Coast Community Services request for funding. Again, Councillor Douglas, Director Douglas, thanks.
Thank you. It's kind of funny, you write a report and you think you've got a lot of good stuff in your report. And then as time goes on, you start thinking about other things you should have incorporated in the report. And, I think when we take a request like this, this is to me a bigger picture item. It's really not about the $1 million. It's about the fairness and others having access to funds that the municipality have if we're going to offer them up. So, so number one, we were saving these funds for a larger community project, one that would affect the majority of our residents. And, you know, if we're gonna start taking requests for the funds, then it's kind of going away from what we put the money away for in the first place, which was for like I said, a larger community project. So kind of no matter where we land today, I think it's about process. So if we're gonna put out $1 million, we should advertise that we're gonna give away $100 million and have other people be able to apply for it. Otherwise, we should be holding it for what the intent was a worthwhile, larger community project that would be owned by the district. Other than that, if you know, we're a government, I'm not so sure we should be contributing to projects as a government. We don't, you know, we collect taxes for services and capital projects for the district. And, you know, I think we need to watch, you know, how we spend or those funds that we get, because, you know, people who want to contribute or have contributed to it, they've signed up to, you know, funding contributions, or, you know, so many of our citizens may have already contributed to this project. Having said that, I'll leave that with council for now.
Great, thank you very much. Those are some good advice, I think. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this particular fund that was created a number of years ago, and I mentioned it before, I started in 2015, indicating that I would love to see us have a larger amount from the community forest, and besides the direct project helps they do in the community. And so we did that. We created a bylaw to create that fund, because you have to do that, and then you take, the community forest gives you that additional amount and you put it in that bylaw. The intention, as proposed by probably staff at the time and some council members, was to hold on to it for a larger community project. That was not my intention when I lobbied and complained and said we should take more of the money to put aside in our fund. My intention was to put money aside for projects within the municipality that we could help with over a number of years. And there was two reasons for that, is that if you distribute the money over a number of asks and projects, your benefit is wider to the community. The second reason I argued and didn't necessarily support the larger project piece is, what's a large project? Councillor Kershaw came forward with an arts building, performance building, a number of years ago, and it was $15 to $25 million to build that arts facility, basically a performing arts facility for the community to go and watch performing arts. Great idea. There's a large document upstairs, a report on that anybody could access, and hopefully it's also online for council members to look at. We have to consider how long it would take us to do that project nowadays, because it's probably $40 to $50 million, and how long it would take us to get money from the community forest. We have to look at how we define large, hugely beneficial community projects. If we built the pool again, it would probably cost $20 million to build the pool. So there's an example. If Sechelt wanted to go its own way on aquatic facilities and put that fund in, we would never have the money. We'd still have to go to the public to borrow the money to build our own pool or take over the pool. So that's the problem with that the one big project idea. And that's why I'm okay with some proposals. I just want to say, Chair, that I look at the proposed amount that's here, and I'd like us to be creative, and I'll tell you why. The project won't be completed for a number of years, but they would like some information and or promise from us that we'll be contributing to what would be the finishing piece to the building from how they present it. I think that won't be for a number of years. So I'd love for us to make a decision to support them, but put in money over a number of years based on those funds that we put aside, and maybe drawing interest directly from those funds to contribute to them annually. It's a creative way to give them a lot of money without taking it all out of our bank account. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rowe.
Through you to Counselor Inkster, so is that something like what we're looking at number 4? Is that what you mean? Not necessarily with that number, but yeah, ideal, yeah. So what we've always said since 2018, and, you know, admittedly have never gotten around to doing it, is an actual policy around this fund, right? And, you know, I guess the thing is that's at the will of council of the day, but my big worry is setting a precedent. And you know, every affordable housing project serves a population that we need, because there isn't an area that we don't need affordable housing. So when the next nonprofit comes along and you know, asks for money, what do we do with them? And again, it's about fairness and transparency. You know, and I mean, it's the same thing, even if you commit over a period of time. We're setting a precedent for another group to do the same thing.
That's an
Oh,
important
yes,
point.
yeah.
Mayor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually turning on the microphone so the camera focused on Councillor Rowe. But I will comment, I'm not sure if council had a chance to see it at 7 minutes after 3, we got an email from the community forest during today's meeting. Just, and I won't do more than to reference that they are along the similar lines that, hey, they'd like to have some discussion. They'd like to see it open up to the community before we'd make a big decision like this. So, you know, I think that certainly makes sense to me, and I don't have a motion as such, but maybe Councillor Toth does.
Councillor Toth.
Nice try. I'm not ready with a motion this time, though. Thank you for highlighting that email. I agree with both the sentiment that they've expressed, which is basically what Director Douglas said. You know, if we're going to give away $1 million, it should be a open and fair and accessible process for anybody to apply for. We might, you know, if we decided we were going to give away $1 million, we might have some fantastic projects come out of this community that could all be equally deserving of $1 million. I lean personally towards option 2A, which would be a $250,000 lump sum from affordable housing. That's just my own sort of thoughts on the matter. I did have 2 questions, though, through you, Chair, to staff, and I apologize because I should have asked these with enough notice that staff could come up with an answer for me. But in the report, it mentions that we did already authorize a DCC waiver for the 34 residential units. I'm just wondering what the value of that DCC waiver was. And I'm also wondering if staff would hazard any sort of a guesstimate, if you will, as to what a permissive tax exemption on a $34 million building might be on an annual basis. Because their current building receives permissive tax exemptions. And so presumably their new building would receive permissive tax exemptions. Thank you.
Great questions.
Yes, thanks. Great question. I know it said it in the report that we did, but I don't have a number, and we're just having a quick discussion. We're not actually quite sure if that did get a DCC reduction or not. We would, before it came to council, we bring that back with a number and actually the motion that from council, if that's the case. So that might have been an error on my part. Sorry, the second part of your question was, yes, permissive tax exemption. They do get it on several of the current buildings, and they would likely apply for this one as well. So, you know, you'd be your tax rate times $34 million. Yeah.
So I think you're looking for the value of those two, though. If we could, even a follow-up email, would that be?
Follow me now, we're later on.
I'd be interested in that information too. Sorry, Sorry, go ahead.
Yep. I just wanted to ask a question the mayor asked earlier about a different topic, about spreading payments out 10 years.
Sure.
It would, and I'm asking myself this question, whether we could do that. And I think my answer is if we're creating a liability for the district, say they get into a loan agreement and they tie us to that loan agreement somehow, then I don't think we could do a 10-year promise to pay so many monies without going to AAP or a referendum. So it depends on how it's looked. If it's a grant for 10 years, okay, that would also be subject to the next council, you know, not reversing this, right? But if we were tied to any form of liability, then I would think we would have to go to approval process.
Does that help, Mayor Henderson?
Yes. Yes. And in this, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and perhaps I don't know how prescriptive we need to be, but I'd kind of like to see us defer this to let the community forest, let us read the email from the community forest to maybe to all sit on the different components and to get some more data. Like it occurs to me that the permissive tax exemption could be $150,000 a year. You know, for example, and rather than speculating today, I think there's just a lot of parts. So maybe I won't make it a motion just yet because that stops the conversation. But
Yeah, sorry, Director Douglas, do you want to?
Sure. So the district side permissive would be about $85,000.
on 34
Yeah.
million.
Yeah,
but
so
they've got
I'm going to
land.
say that's almost half of what it would be in total.
Because that's just our.
Yeah.
Right.
So it'd be close to the 150,000.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I just want to reflect on this particular project as a very important housing project. We made housing a real priority in this council. And so this is a housing project, which we've given lots of density upzoning to lots of developers. We've done, you know, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 or more units. And yet there's these 34 units that need to be built. And this to me, this building is taking longer already than I think it should, because I live in the downtown and I keep waiting for it to be done. It seems like almost like a vacant derelict situation. And the housing is desperately needed. It says housing specifically for women and children, and the support programs for the entire community will access. And the focus is on residents and the unhoused population. Like we can say we can use $1 million to do some fancy project, which we can be proud of as a shiny, beautiful project for the whole community. But to me, that's not as important as getting this project done, where people desperately need it now. And also, to me, there's an opportunity cost if we don't get this done, and the longer it drags on, is that people suffer. People, you know, the village just keeps waiting and hoping, and these services are desperately needed. We always say when we build housing, we need wraparound services. Well, this has been designed to provide these wraparound services that the whole community can use. And I can't think of anything more important right now in this community. So even though it's $1 million, it's kind of a rough round number, but that still leaves another $1 million in the Community Forest Fund for what other things, which is another large amount of money. So if they're asking for $1 million and they still have other millions of dollars to raise as well, and people in the community are working to do that, I think it's important that the District of Sechelt shows some leadership and says, yeah, we're going to put some money in. Yes, there'll be taxes waived, et cetera, as they are for all social program buildings, which is normal. It's not anything that overly concerns me. If you want to live in a democracy where society supports those in need. And to me, this housing is desperately needed, because the idea of women and children being homeless and having nowhere to go, it just irks me. And so they are the most vulnerable people pretty much in our society, and the rest are extremely vulnerable as well. So please, let's come to some agreement to provide, I mean, if they want $1 million, people talk to me about the Community Forest Fund and they say, like, why don't you just give money to that, Social Services Community Fund for that building? Why don't you? I can't really come up with a reason why we don't. Can you? Thanks.
Councillor Bell, do you have your mic on?
Yes, through the chair comment, I do support, supporting this project, in some shape or form. So whatever that is, as we continue this discussion, I think this will be a game changer for the coast. I don't think it's just Sechelt that will benefit from this. And it is very, very desperately needed. And one thing I don't want to lose sight of is also Councillor Rowe's comment around a policy. Because as we go down this path, I think it's very important that we have something going forward. Because a lot of organizations need financial support.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
Just one comment of clarity, just so that we're all talking about the same thing. This project's going forward. Whether this money comes to them or not, this money is not to build any of the housing component, right? They showed us exactly what this or what the area that this would pay for. So I want us to be clear on that. And I'm not in any way saying that I don't support this project. But we're a small community. Almost $2 million in a fund that we actually get to do something with is should not be taken lightly. And I'm just hot on the fairness thing for everyone else in the community and other projects and other, the precedent setting. So I would want to make sure that we have good policy around it before we go handing out any amount of money from that fund. And so I am in support of the motion that Mayor Henderson hasn't brought forward yet around deferring this with bringing back some information we've identified. But also, I'm not clear on actually when they need the money. At what point in the development is that money required to be in their bank account?
If I can chip in on that, yeah, I'm glad that you were specific, that the project's going ahead. And as I understand it, if the $1 million doesn't happen or isn't given, some therapy rooms are left in shell condition. So, the project is moving ahead. I had another point and now I've completely forgotten it. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really don't want us to confuse supportive housing with programming for vulnerable populations. And the comments that I heard sounds like there's some confusion on what we're funding here. I grew up in a single parent household on welfare, $100 away from homelessness. I am fully supportive of supportive housing projects for women and children, people at risk. Nobody's ever going to get a different answer out of me on that. However, Councillor McLaughlin has talked a lot about transparency and processes and making sure we've got policies. But the proposal to hand community services $1 million just is literally throwing out process because they caught wind of some money sitting in a reserve. Maybe we come up with a policy, maybe we go through a application process, maybe we give them $1.9 million. But if we're giving away a significant sum of money, it needs to be supported in policy. And that's all I'm going to say to that. Thanks.
Okay. Mayor Henderson.
Thank you. I think I'm going to make the motion that I didn't make, that Councillor Rowe is going to make, that we defer this to allow staff to provide to no later. We defer with a report to come back to us no later than the end of July 2024. providing additional information, input from the community forest and recommendations on the policy implications of proceeding. Now, help me, it's on the fly. By all means, friendly amendments welcome, but Inkster.
Is there discussion on defer motion? It always confuses me, this one. Just, can we talk about it? We can? Okay,
Table, it's the same as table.
okay.
Talk to the motion. It's okay. It's okay, because I.
Okay, is that, just to clarify, because
Yeah.
that's why I never vote
Yeah.
for them, because it means it's proroguing almost, stop talking. Anyway, if it's allowed and the chair says it's allowed, I'll go there. I'm not gonna, I won't be supporting this. I think that I think that going in that direction is opening a can of worms. I think we make decisions at this table where the elected representatives of the people of Sechelt. Thanks.
I'm actually, just to, my thought on that though, is that we are making decisions on it. We're just looking for, instead of at council of the whole, everyone agreeing to give $1 million out, what we're, I think to echo Councillor Toth, we need a policy on how to deal with this money. That's all we're doing. But that's just my 2 cents. Councillor McLaughlin.
Right, thank you, through the chair. I mean, a policy, because it's a large amount of money, I don't think the amount of money really matters. If you have a policy, you should have a policy. Whatever policy we have now, and the policy seems to suggest that for a major community project, and I think this is a community project, that we can decide. I also think building a building with a whole floor or whatever in shell space, it doesn't show much real support in terms of getting behind this project. Also, I think if the District of Sechelt did support the development of these services, it would help other fundraisers have security and surety, knowing that it's going ahead, that there's more support for it, that we can get those donations needed to get the entire budget that's required. The longer we wait, the more time it takes, the more expensive the project is going to get. So I think deferring things and not having this building put together and fully in part with the community services for the broader community is a mistake. Thank you.
I'm just wondering if is there any other comment on the motion that's front of, I would like it read back again if I could. Thanks.
And again, please correct me if I've missed anything. My understanding was that the decision on the request from the Sunshine Coast Community Service Society for $1 million to be donated from the District of Sechelt Community Forest Legacy Reserve Fund be deferred with a report to come back no later than July 2024, providing additional input from the community forest and policy implications.
July 31st, but yeah.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, through the chair. So that's the $1 million ask. That's what we're proposing? I'm not, so with the options, the other options are off the table, or does that mean?
Yes, unless those options come back from staff, which could very well be. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I've already said I don't support this because of the reasons I previously given. I'm not concerned necessarily about I'm not saying when I don't support it that I want to give them $1 million tomorrow. What I'm saying is that I think we make the decisions, and we could look at a number of other options, which could mean paying them $100,000 over a number of years for that particular project, which will be finished in a few years and will need us for the final finishing project, as was mentioned by Councillor Rowe and others. So I just don't want to defer it. It's not that I want to give them $1 million tomorrow, but I want to talk more about how we can give them money over a number of years to complete those rooms right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I support this motion to defer. I don't see it as removing other options. I see it as bringing forward feedback that we have asked for in terms of the referral to the community forest. Just before we came into this meeting, I received a phone call from the community forest talking about this, and they didn't realize it was on today's agenda. So I had asked them to quickly draft something to council so that we had an idea of where they stood. I would like to see us receive a formal referral from them on this at the very minimum. And so I'll be supporting the motion to defer. Thank you.
Okay, I'm guessing that everyone's expressed their opinion on the motion. Is that fair? So I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? 4 in favor, all those against? 3 against, so the motion passes. Thank you, and I think that's the end of the agenda. So I will call for a motion to adjourn. In favor, all in favor, thank you.